This is still paper.
I can.
If I can down
You
your
need-
agenda.
I can. If you need something, I'll pull it for you. So.
It's like October board agenda.
Still got that.
So you're still thinking about the little county community? No.
I'll call the meeting to order. If the board and guests would please rise for the pledging.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Treasurer Frida, would you please call the roll?
Certainly, Madam Clerk. Trustee Mohica.
Here.
Trustee Cascarello.
Present.
Trustee Brewer.
Present.
Trustee Bowen.
Here.
Treasurer Fido is here. Clerk Clark, you have a quorum.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda. Yeah. They are, there's no volume.
That's better.
Good work.
I move,
Karen,
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the agenda as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. You have in your packet a number of communications regarding Wharf, Altium, and the sheriff's substation. If you have questions, you can reach out to the appropriate people afterwards. Public comment. We have a room full, so I will be using my timer. But if you would like to speak, feel free to come to the mic. Okay, seeing none. Oops.
There are seats in the front row for anybody that's standing.
We don't bite.
My name's David Howell. I live at 9487 Guinea Road in Delta Township. The former supervisor was in the, there was a story about him today in the Lansing State Journal. And I just wanted to basically say that from my point of view, he has roughly three choices. You know, he can choose to accept the office that he's been elected to and get sworn in after November 20th up until the end of the year. He can get sworn in and then resign, or he can refuse to get sworn in and let the office be vacated. Two of those options, the ball would then be thrown into the court of the Board of Trustees. And then you would have, my understanding is 45 days to interview or to appoint someone to be the supervisor until an election in November of 2026. But the real point that I wanted to get to is that I hope that the board would consider using a competitive interview process that's befitting of a community or a township with a budget of over $28 million a year. I don't think that, you should appoint someone, based on strictly partisanship views. I think it should be done on merit. And if it's done on merit, I think that once the ball's in your court, that you should announce the position to the public in a very inclusive way, very widespread way. then you should review the resumes and the references and then interview in a public manner and then select some finalists and then interview the last, 2 or 3 finalists and then make a decision. That would be a lot more clear cut than being inactive during those 45 days and then throwing it open to a special election that would have to be called by the clerk of Eaton County. So I just think that, there's been a lot of drama since September 3rd. And, we need to take this chapter and put it behind us and move forward. And I think the way forward involves a competitive interview process conducted by the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there support? It's been moved and supported. Treasurer Peter, would you call home, please?
Trustee Cascarella,
Yes.
trustee Brewer,
Yes.
trustee Bowen,
Yes.
trustee Mohica,
Yes.
treasurer Fido is yes, clerk Clark,
Yes,
you have 6 votes.
thank you. Which takes us to our first item of business, which is a rezoning for a parcel. Peter, thank you.
Hello, members of the board. Greetings, everyone here tonight. My name is Peter Menser. I'm the Planning and Economic Development Director of Delta Township. So on the agenda tonight is under new business, we have a rezoning request from an applicant named Todd Costa, who's a real estate agent in this case. There's a parcel on West Saginaw at 6020. It's a former funeral home. It's about almost 1 acre, proposed to rezone from O office to C commercial. So the applicants has what they've said in the application materials have said that they intend on demoing the property, getting it rezoned to commercial, demoing the building that's there, which is a funeral home, kind of a specific use build, and then marketing the property to potential commercial folks. I can say kind of that I have received probably several requests over the year that I've been in my position about potential tenants on that site, all of which have been commercial. So there's not a lot to share on this that's not really covered in the staff memo. The one thing I do want to point out is it's adjacent, this property is adjacent to a residential property and then a residential neighborhood to the north. So I wanted to tell you that the zoning ordinance does require some buffering between those land uses. So if this, whether it's office or commercial, there's going to be buffering between those 2 uses. One is a 40-foot building setback, but then also the establishment of a 30-foot landscape buffer area that within which, and there's some room for kind of negotiation between my office and the applicant or whatever, with a future project that comes along to provide berming, interlocking, landscaping, fence material, combination of all 3 of those things, whatever we really need to do. But that would be best determined when, if and when we get a redevelopment project on that property. So we would include that. For now, there's not a lot of buffering. The house is kind of right there behind it, but we would tackle that in the future. The only other thing to note are really just kind of the differences of uses between the office and the commercial zoning district. All of the listed uses in office are also in commercial. The uses that are in commercial that are not in office are plasma centers, bars, drive-through restaurants, shopping centers, gas stations, and motor vehicle service repair facilities. Caveat to that is those uses are allowed by special land use permit. So we would get a second bite in any of those uses that are proposed to go here. You would see that as part of a special land use permit in the future. So just remembering that, everything else is covered in the memo, I think. So there is a motion provided for you. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this request. So there's a motion that matches the Planning Commission recommendation in your meeting packet. And the applicant is here in the room if you have any questions for him, and certainly I'm here as well.
Rhonda.
just wondering if Mr. Costa has purchased the property yet, or if this,
I believe they have an option, but Todd is in the room. There he is. Can you come up here, please? You know, introduce yourself, say your address.
Hi, I'm Todd Costa. My address is 4277 Okemos Road in Okemos, Michigan. We have an option to purchase the property if we get approval.
thank you, that's all I needed to know.
Any other questions, Dennis?
Yeah, maybe you can tell me, is your intention to make this a build to suit, you know, depending on what tenant that you're gonna accommodate?
No, I'm not really a developer. I'm really a real estate broker, and my intent is to buy it, get it rezoned, clear it, and then
Market it?
just market it and sell it, you know, probably
Okay.
to I don't know, what I've seen as I've been marketing it the last 18 months is I'll get calls from restaurants or fast food users. But the timeline was so long to go from A to Z to get it rezoned and demoed and all of that, that it was becoming a hindrance. So we want to just get it rezoned to commercial and then see what the demand is there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Fonda?
Sorry, just one more question for Peter. So have we typically rezoned a structure that's not owned? 'Cause I knew-
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It happens in all kinds of
So I just
different,
wanted to double
it
check.
happens a lot of different ways, but it's often with a rezoning, it very often is a person with an option, just because they don't want to necessarily
I don't
commit
blame
to.
them.
It's pending approval of the rezoning.
Thank you.
I think it's very typical.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Thanks.
Fonda,
I move that the Delta Township Board approve the request from Todd Costa to rezone a 0.95 acre parcel at 6020 West Saginaw Highway, parcel number 040008800503030 from O office to C commercial as described in case number PSL 2024-0004, and there are 4 reasons listed.
support. It's been moved and seconded to rezone 6220, I just lost it.
60/20.
6020 West Saginaw. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And now, what you've all been waiting for. Anderson Park permit. Oh, I don't know. Marcus, are you going to present?
Thank you, Madam Clerk and Board. I think the board member explains a recommendation that we extend the hours for Anderson Park from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. until April 30th, 2025.
Questions, Andrea?
Not a question. I was gonna make a motion.
Okay.
Sorry. What, did you have a question?
I do, yes. Why are we moving forward with a motion when we have all these unanswered questions?
Based on the head nods from the board last week, those were our follow-up points to bring to you a motion tonight and continue to work on those items that are listed in the board memo.
Okay, do we typically change policy in this manner? If the policy is dawn to dusk for all of our parks, and now we're changing policy, are we setting a precedent here about how we're changing policy without having all of our questions answered?
I think we've given permits in the past to groups and events. We've never done one to a park specifically.
Okay, and what about the Parks Commission? What is their role in all of this?
This has not gone to the Parks Commission. I am trying, as you can see from the memo, trying to get it back to the commission. This came to the board and the board expected me to come and present based on that.
Okay.
And just for clarification, Parks Committee is for advisory purposes, actually.
Well, for advising us, right,
Correct.
on things.
Did you have a question?
Well, I have some comments to make, but is this before us in a motion?
Andrea?
Not yet.
I move that the Delta Township Board approve the permit request to set Anderson Park's hours to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. effective from November 19th, 2024 through April 30th, 2025.
Is there support?
Support.
It's been moved and supported to extend the hours through a permit. Dennis?
Thank you. I have some comments because we didn't really get a chance to respond to Marcus's memorandum to us at the last meeting. Some of the things that I wanted to address and respond to was the comments made by the MMBA, and there's several of them here. One was that they alleged that they were the main caretaker of this park. And what I see is that so basically, there is not necessarily a management agreement at all between Delta Township and the MMBA, a written one, if I am correct with that. Manager Reed, is there a written agreement?
There was an agreement back in 2008, but I don't think there's ever been a signed agreement or has not been updated in those times unless I'm.
That is correct.
So the agreement basic was a verbal agreement because it was never finalized with the signatures at all.
It was never presented to the board as a motion of any sort.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an agreement that did come to the board and then was sent back to the Parks Commission for approval. I've not found any signed documents. I have found documents where the leader of the MMBA was listed at the bottom along with the previous Parks Director.
All right, okay. It's just some comments were made during the testimony, and the one member said that this was a purpose-built park, you know, and that infers it was just for their use. However, that was contradicted that other people saying that it was a safe place for hikers, runners, and bikers together. So, you know, I assume that the bikers really do accept hikers, birders, dog walkers using the trails. My understanding, there've been complaints that people using these trails for walking other than biking, you know, have been discouraged. You know, whether that's phenomenon or not, I don't know. The statement made by them is that they've worked to clear homeless people in encampments. I'm really concerned because I don't know if this organization has the authority to clear anyone off the park. I don't think they've been deputized by the Eaton County Sheriff or they've been given the authority by the Delta Park staff at all. So I have that issue. And then there's the issue of liability. If we're allowing that to happen, this organization to be caretaker and then removing people or whatever besides trash, then that presumes a liability issue, you know, if we're allowing that to happen. So they said they've cleared trees and dangerous pathway situations of the trail, but there's been more than tree clearing. There's been an alteration of the forest floor just to accommodate bikers. It's a disruption of the ecosystem, in my opinion. There has been our environmental impact on this, and I don't know if there's been a study in terms of, you know, what areas of this park need to be protected. Is there a vulnerable habitat? We don't know that I'm aware of. And the damage to the forest floor needs to be corrected and not repeated, in my opinion. There's also a comment made, we addressed the lights in the bedroom window complaint this morning with a group of volunteers. We routed the point where light might shine in the windows, that they did. However, it took 7 months, you know, from the first registered complaint of the adjacent homeowner on this about a newly routed trail uncomfortably close to his house to be addressed. And not only him, there was another one as well that had made a complaint. The homeowner had not been approached before this change was made. Only after bikers started using this trail at night, months later, did the issue of the park use after official hours arise. This finally brought attention to the issue and now has resulted in a rerouting of the concerning trail. But even then, the only indication that this new trail reroute has been closed is plastic tape across the trail from what I can see. This is a temporary response at best. The larger issue here is that there are only 3 designated trails in Anderson Park, which are identified by color codes. However, there are numerous offshoots, loops, and spurs jutting from these designated biking trails. This is a concern that needs to be addressed, in my opinion. More and better signage of the 3 designated trails need to be placed throughout the park, and deviating them by bikers should be prohibited and stated prominently in the park interest. What stops this same situation from happening again? If not by the MMMBA members here, but by other non-member bikers that are using it, that aren't part of your organization. What rules and safeguards should there be in place to avoid similar occurrences? There's another comment. Recognize that this is truly a beneficial partnership on both sides. I agree with that. The township does and should continue to welcome partnerships from organized groups in making our parks better for all users and not solely for single interest recreational organizations' use. It is apparent that the township has allowed the MMBA partnership to become a little bit too independent over the years in its presumptive management of Anderson Park. There needs to be a reset of this arrangement, starting with a clear memorandum of understanding between Delta and the organization. Delta Parks and the Rec Department need to reassert itself to be the management agent of Anderson Park for the shared enjoyment of all potential users while preserving the park's habitat. Ideally, this would be best accomplished through an improved comprehensive management plan for the park. I'm just about done. Excuse me with my voice. I've had an issue with my coughing situation here. Delta parks are closed from dawn to dusk by ordinance. I have a question. What permits has Delta granted in the past to extend open hours and for what purpose from to whom? We haven't really had any clarification on that with any degree of specificity. What other jurisdictions allow their public parks to be used by seasonal permit after normal operation hours and for what purposes? I don't know about that. Are there permits for one-time events and not for blanket seasonal purposes, of which this motion here is before us is presented to be doing? Are not we setting a precedent which could result in other interest user groups asking to keep another park open after normal hours? What legal basis will we have to deny such a request? Let's say nighttime dog walkers, laser tag enthusiasts, astronomy enthusiasts, and the list goes on. Presumably hikers are not restricted to the designated biking trails in this park and can wander throughout the park with personal lighting up to the park's boundaries and even into Wildermer Nature Center itself, because there's a trail that connects our park to Wildermer. I said, have they even been advised of this situation? If Anderson Park is such a regional and unique park for bikers, hikers, birders, etc., which I believe it is, shouldn't Delta actually promote this usage throughout the region and the state, advertising that our park is open at night for all comers? What's to stop us from doing that? What is the environmental impact using the park after hours? How disruptive may it be for the nocturnal animals that live within the park? Finally, there are 2 issues before us. One is the management of the park itself and the hours of operation. There does seem to be a rush to the status quo here, which doesn't address the issues I mentioned. There needs to be a written and approved memorandum of understanding with the organization and Delta Township so there's a clear understanding of its roles and responsibilities. While open hours at dusk may be acceptable for Anderson Park, it comes with concerns. The issue of multiple users, no control of where hikers and gamers may go within the park after dark, thereby causing neighboring residents concerns, may rise again, setting a precedent of opening the park after dusk. What basis would the township have in denying such similar requests to another park? 10 p.m., in my opinion, is excessive. Delta cannot fathomably accommodate every individual schedule or recreational group's wish, our own residents, let alone others. Nighttime softball, cricket, pickleball, where will it end? This carve out will eventually bring such issues before the board in the future. So I am concerned about this and I cannot support the motion to approve this extension of the hours. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I yield.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I was very moved and impressed by the MMMBA people that have shown up for a couple of weeks now. They've been here, they've shown up, and they are obviously very passionate. And I do agree that we expressed an interest in, let's try to help them or come up with a solution as quickly as we possibly can, which it looks like you all have. My only thought was that I was hoping that it had gone through the parks, but I found out that it didn't. I didn't know that because they don't even meet until December. And I'm okay with that at this point, because I think we can use this as sort of a pilot program, see how it goes, and then do all of the things we need to do to make sure it's not only working for the bikers, but for the residents that are there. So, the only thing that I said, and I sent an email to Brian, because I always tell him you'll never be surprised by what I say at the board table, because I'm going to tell you in advance, is that I would have preferred 9 PM, because if you're like me, I'm a talker. So 10 PM becomes 11 PM. Because I'm going to wind up and then I'm going to talk about my ride and I'm going to do everything else and then I'm going to leave the property. So I was hoping that the hours would end at 9 because 9 becomes 10. So that was the only concern that I had, was not till 10 PM, make it to 9 because you know they're not going to leave till 10. So that was my recommendation to Brian, but the proposal is presented the way it is and we either voted up or voted down. And the other thing that I want to say is I listened to the riders that are coming here from all over the region. I think there's people from Langsburg and other places. I tried to note that down as you were speaking. And it's so funny because over the weekend, I ran into a friend of mine who works for the state of Michigan as an accountant or accounting manager. And he does a lot of mountain biking. And I told him that on our agenda before us is this quest for mountain biking, and he thought it was very progressive of Delta Township to not do what is normally done, but to open up and give it a try, but manage it. Work with them, monitor it, let's make sure it works for everybody. And he is a part of the minority mountain bikers. There is such a thing, they're out on Facebook. And they have a wonderful biking group, and he's like, well, I may bring my bike, because I come here for meetings and I may be able to, I said, well, if it approves, you can bike after work like everybody else, because we believe in diversity and you can't let one in and not the other. So those are my comments. I will be supporting the proposal as presented, but I do wish it was 9 PM. Thank you.
Andrea?
I just wanted to make a couple comments. Treasurer Fedewa, appreciate you sharing your views on this. I won't try to speak to all of what you said. And I do believe this permit, this temporary permit, gives us an opportunity to work with the triple MBA, with residents and with staff and the Parks Commission to make sure, we have a strong policy and can make, if there are adjustments that need to be made, experiences realized during this time to make sure that the end result is a positive one for the community. But I did spend time, I went out and walked the trails, talked to folks that were out there, heard a lot from staff, from those that put in their own kind of blood, sweat and tears and making improvements to the park. And, it started with an agreement to do it. And I've heard nothing to convince me or lead me otherwise that this hasn't been a tremendous partnership between the organization and township staff. And all the decision-making has been done collaboratively, investments, projects. There's a lot of brainstorming that has continued to take place over several years and in a really positive way. I don't believe any of the comments that were made about the impact, the investments in the park, and the resulting usage had on ending dumping, people who were living there, was that they were directly removing folks. I think the public presence in the park naturally deterred a lot of that behavior. They weren't taking that in their hands. And I just want to make that clear. Again, I have been incredibly impressed with the association, the commitment they've made to a park that had very little value and now has become a regional destination. It's a gem and a great resource we have. We may not be at the perfect place right now. I believe this temporary permit gives us a chance to kind of tune that and get in a great place. But we should be looking, one, for more partnerships. We should be looking to advance the opportunities we have in a way that's fitting in the community and works for the community to expand recreational opportunities. And I'm very supportive of that and grateful for the partnership we've had thus far, and just look forward to that growing between the township and the triple MBA.
Beth?
The motion says to approve a permit request, but it doesn't say who we are giving this permit to.
It's for the park. It's to the park to.
So it's not a permit to users, it's we're changing the hours of the park.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, so that's different than what I thought.
Okay, any other questions? We have a motion before us to approve a permit to set Anderson Park's hours from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. effective November 19th, 2024, expiring April 30th, 2025. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
Motion carries. Peter, I believe you're back up for sign ordinance. Manager's office.
Managers report.
Oh, sorry. I always want to skip everything. Yes. Sorry about that. This is not my full-time gig.
I will take no offense to that. I will keep it brief. I just wanted to let the board know, I know I sent out an update, but Cata Rides is now active in Delta. So this is the micro transit grant. Can you hand those down, Mary? So if you get a chance to check this out, but this is an exciting new program and partnership with Cata to help workers get to work, but also airport and different things. So that went into effect November 12th, I believe. So very recently. Last week, we opened bids for 2 projects, our Sharp Park improvements, and also Delta Center Cemetery project. So the good news is we received quite a few bids, 5 bids for the Sharp Park improvements and 8 bids for the cemetery improvements. So those will come, we're doing the due diligence with our consultant Viridis and our Parks and Engineering department. So we'll be bringing that back with a recommendation in December. But very good news to get, it's nice to see a lot of bids again. Our new fire chief, Dave Feichner, started today. He had to, his moving truck was showing up this afternoon. So I'll be happy to introduce him at the next meeting, but allowed him to get his stuff settled. Happy to announce with our chill grant, our first round of income verifications have been completed. So we are still working on the project-wide environmental review. We cannot start construction until that is done. So once that is done, CAP will be out to visit these homes and start building out the project list and that type of thing. But the income verification, so we have roughly 20 or so applicants, and then we have several who are on a waiting list, probably 20 to 30 on a waiting list as well, if those don't work out. So very good demand for this program. So excited to get that going. You may have seen on Facebook, Davis Highway project was reopened today. So turned out very nice, roundabout by the opening to Altium. So, and then Nixon Road between Davis Highway and Mount Hope will be constructed next year. So, and that's part of the General Motors appropriations from the state for those projects. Our St. Joe Water Main project is making more progress. They're making connections on some of the water main on east of Snow Road. The main water main is down to the state building next to the Home Depot lot. So we're getting very close to the end down there with the main water main. So they'll continue to make connections throughout there. And then of course follow behind with the paving. You may
The
have noticed.
projected end date for that, do you think, Mark?
They will be substantially complete with that project by the end of the year. There will be some work next year with coming back with to fix some of the restoration or that type of thing. The main water main portion will be completed here very soon, with then individual connections still being made. And then, of course, the pathway and reconstruction will take another month or two.
But Brian, are we gonna be able to have the water and light issue resolved so that there's paving before winter?
I hope so. They indicated they've received all the easements they needed and they gave a go ahead to move the guide wires. I will have Rick and Jake, we have our progress meeting tomorrow. And Mary Borland attends those, ask that question to see if they've heard anything from Board of Water and Light on that. You may have noticed the fence is down at the sheriff's substation. We are getting a lot of customer traffic in there, so folks are thinking that is open. Very good progress being made on that on the inside. So a lot of tile is up, even some painting. I think Preston's office is already done. Very close. So, but that's all I have. And Supervisor, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Brian?
Now.
So Erin, are you doing the plan?
Yeah. Sorry, you're stuck with me. But it was a collaborative effort with the planning department as well, so certainly did not do all this work alone. We began working on updates to the sign ordinance. The primary goal was to address the concerns about content neutrality. The board may recall 2014, 2015, the Supreme Court decision that mandated ordinances related to signs be content neutral, so we can't regulate signs differently based on what they say is without a compelling reason is the really summarized version of that Supreme Court decision. And in this time period, there have been a number of other cases that have sort of fine-tuned what exactly that means in terms of, you know, how municipalities are to go about regulating. The other thing we did with this ordinance update is just some language cleanup. So as you go through, helping make things a little clearer, we did some review of like the definitions. There was some definitions in there that we defined a sign, but never spoke about it in the actual regulation. So just removing those extraneous terms that just don't need to be in there if we're not regulating. The sign regulations themselves are pretty untouched. So the number of signs you can have, the illumination standards, all of those things are staying the same. We did put some more robust language in on the objectionable content, I'll call it. So as you may recall, over the summer, we had an issue with some signage that had some, pretty crass language on it. And so we added some more robust language to help us be able to better enforce if that situation were to come up again. And then we did change our temporary signs in terms of how they're defined. So instead of our current ordinance, the big thing is we regulate political signs differently from other types of temporary signs. And so what we've done is we've created just an event sign. And so all events, whether it's a open house or a political event or
anything else you can think of, a party,
Right.
all of those temporary signs have the same standards so that there's not any content-based regulation of those temporary signs. So that's very summary of what's been done. We have reviewed it with our legal team as well to make sure that how we've made these changes would stand up to any sort of legal scrutiny.
Andrea.
If I may, yeah, thanks for that overview. I did, when looking through the changes, and I'm not sure, I think some of it just inadvertently touches, but I know in the last Sign Board of Appeals meeting we had, there was an issue came up. There was an issue that came up and I just flagged, maybe this is something we need to correct as we're looking at updating our sign ordinance for consistency's sake, where it just felt like, I think the entire board was in agreement that, we were forced to issue a variance, but it was a common sense issue where it was just a lack of consistency on sizing that really required the variance. And is that an adjustment to be made? And I know there were a number of issues that came up in the last few years with the Sign Board of Appeals, where similar circumstances, and this being one of them, our compliance with court decisions and those necessary changes. But again, we saw a number of, and I think Dave probably has the laundry list. I just wanted to make sure if we're going through this exercise of updating for the very necessary changes that are to be compliant with the court decisions, that we're also making these other changes at the same time, because it's, much as I enjoy the Sign Board of Appeals and find the issues often fascinating, and I'm glad we can accommodate needs from different entities as they're placing new signs in the township. If we can be proactive and address issues up front with corrections in our ordinance to avoid the need for requests, I think it makes sense that we do that. Of course, especially when we're seeing regular or similar requests coming and being approved, that it's appropriate. So just would suggest before we get a final revised ordinance that we do that double check with Dave on any of those other potential issues, that a little cleanup in our ordinance could be really helpful going forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we'll make sure that we, sort of circle back with planning and make sure that if there's any sort of consistent issues that can be addressed. Obviously, the whole point of having the Board of Appeals is because there is those unique circumstances that you just can't write into ordinance. So as much as you'd like to completely get rid of them.
I totally understand that, but there were some
But
repeated
yeah, if
issues
there's some
that we
repeat
were seeing.
issues, yeah, if we can address them, that is certainly a great suggestion.
Appreciate that.
Erin, we had an issue that went before Sign Board of Appeals recently regarding Bass Pro Shop and wanting additional parking places. When we did the version that we're now rewriting, we reduced the number of mandatory parking places. So I find it interesting that, and maybe you can't even answer this, but that if someone needs on occasion to have more parking, that they can't get a variance for that, but we give a variance for reduced parking. Is there a way for the ordinance to allow? I mean, all I see happening with denying their request for additional parking places is that their overflow crowd is just gonna go into Hobby Lobby and all of the other stores around there. And then they're gonna come and complain that Bass Pro customers are using their parking places, and it's just, I could just see it going down the hill. Do we have a
Sure.
giant snowball?
Yeah, so communities do oftentimes put maxes on parking because we don't want to just create these big giant parking fields where, for one day a year, you need parking. And so you because it's all this unused space that could be put to better use, whether it's green space or other, commercial buildings instead of just parking lots. As far as I know, and Peter can correct me if I'm wrong, but upon denial, they were told that they could, revise their proposal and come back for a different variance, but they chose to just reduce it to that maximum number and move forward with their project. So I think on Bass Pro's side, they were comfortable moving forward with that maximum number of parking. But I can't speculate further on, how they came up with their number that they chose.
Or how we came up with ours.
Oh, how we can, our numbers, I was not here. I don't know if Peter was here for drafting those ordinance numbers or how we came up with those.
I will add if I can, on the parking, obviously that's our zoning ordinance. What we have approved, I know at least since I've been on the ZBA, we have approved increases in parking spots above what this ordinance currently allows since those changes have been passed.
So we've allowed it for some.
Yeah, and every variance is on the merits of each application. It's an
Correct.
independent decision, not a precedent-setting decision.
Correct.
Right. And if I can add, but we did get a revised plan for Bass Pro on Friday afternoon that complies with our parking ordinance.
Okay. Yes.
Getting back to the sign ordinance, a question for you or anybody that can answer it is, are there going to be any grandfathered entities as a result of this change that you're aware of?
Most of the changes in terms of the actual regulatory changes were to temporary signs, which by their nature are temporary, so they're going to be removed after a period of time anyway.
Okay.
So
it'll be self-correcting is what you're saying?
Yeah, the current sign ordinance and any changes we propose would retain this language, does have an allowance for non-conforming signs. So anything that was legal when it was installed can remain.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions, Beth?
Can you speak to the elimination of the on-premises product displays section?
Sure. So that was a discussion with the planning department about that language, and the conclusion was reached that that type of regulation for that product display is better served under the zoning ordinance through our site plan approval process, because we do have regulations about on-site product display that would,
Okay. That's what I
address
suspected, but I
that
just wanted to know.
specific issue. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Karen, did you have anything?
I'm good, thank you.
Anyone else?
Good. Thank you. Okay. We'll be back in the future with an actual introduction. So thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Okay, and our last issue is self-storage zoning.
Last issue tonight. Greetings, thanks for the opportunity to speak again tonight. So in your meeting packet, there's a memo from me about self-storage facilities in commercial zoning. So this kind of came about through some observations that I've made just in my year and a half plus at the township. We get a lot of inquiries about building storage. I dealt with this in other municipalities in mid-Michigan, and they are, I think, depending on your perspective on the issue, the challenge is for a municipality. Self-storage facilities are cheap to build. They are one of the products that is lucrative to real estate investors, and they are very often owned by outside folks that just kind of build these nationally. So, but I think counter to that, one of the challenges that presents for that, the ease of building them and the fact that they are cheap and lucrative to people, are that they don't really offer kind of the functionality. I think that maybe the expectation is, particularly along, I'll use West Saginaw Highway corridor as the primary example for tonight. So they don't provide a lot of jobs. They're inactive land uses. They really, to me, represent an opportunity cost that could displace a future, probably more desirable development option. And we have limited land in the township just by municipal boundaries, but also West Saginaw particularly. There's only so many properties that front on West Saginaw. We only have so many opportunities to kind of direct growth and development along the corridor. Particularly with the emphasis that the board has raised with the adoption of the Corridor Improvement Authority. There's a lot of eyes on the corridor here, and it's really our primary commercial artery in the community. So the memo speaks to a lot of information about self-storage. I mean, generally, we allow right now, self-storage facilities are allowed in commercial and industrial. What the memo and what I guess my team is suggesting is to remove them from commercial zoning and limit their development only to industrial zoned parcels. There's a map in your memo, in your meeting packet that shows where the commercial and industrial zoning districts are located. The thing that is not mentioned, and trustee Fido mentioned this in reference to signs, the thing that's not mentioned in this memo that I thought about yesterday afternoon at home is the legal non-conforming status of what happens to the developments that we do have now that are in commercial. And what would happen is similar to what Aaron just mentioned is they remain, they'd be legal non-conforming land uses. They could remain in operation for now until the land use becomes not desirable to the owner, I guess. If there's one scenario by where if they would not be able to expand, both in extent or like size of the building or moving buildings and other locations on the site, they're really limited to kind of the current footprint. If they were to destroy it, if a tornado or hurricane, some other weather phenomenon, earthquake came through here and destroyed the facilities, they would most likely be able to rebuild it the way that they were before. So this is the beginning of the process. I plan on talking to our township attorney along the way and to get a firm answer on that. But generally, the legal non-conforming can exist into perpetuity essentially. And there would be options if there were some kind of damage that impacted an investment, a current investment in the future. So I'll have more information on that. So the way this process might work, if you're interested in pursuing this amendment, it would be an amendment to the zoning ordinance. Unlike what we just saw with the signs are in the code of ordinances, the district use table, which is what ultimately we'd be amending, is in the zoning ordinance. So that process is an initiation by the members of this board. It would go to, and what the motion reflects is you would be sending it to the planning commission for review. I would post a legal notice in the paper. The planning commission would weigh in on ordinance language. They would provide you with a recommendation. We would then bring it back to the board for final consideration and potential adoption. If you do adopt it, it becomes part of the code, and that's how we operate moving forward. So, yeah, if you have any questions about this, please do let me know. There's no one here representing kind of the storage industry, but that may come up along the way.
Peter, I want to thank you for bringing this issue up. Brian had mentioned it and I saw it on the agenda, and this is an issue that's been bothering me for a while in the township, and these things are springing up like daisies, and oftentimes they don't fit into the surroundings. They're aesthetically unpleasing. I had an initial concern of the one that was around the corner on Delta Commerce Drive that we recently approved. But I rationalized it because it was really next to a lot of apartments, things like that. So there might be a need for storage of those people that live in those apartments. But there's just a proliferation of these things. And I know that as things get moved from one part of the township to another, Delta Crossings, and making a big box store over here in the center part of our township vacant, there might be a temptation to make those storage facilities, for example. But I'm not necessarily sure that fits into, the character or what we want as far as the township is concerned in its future development. So this is a first step. I think it's a good forward thinking initiative, you've come up with in staff. So I want to thank you for that, and look forward to this coming back before the board for further discussion.
Andrew.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Treasurer Fidewa said. Really appreciate the initiative on this, and a great recommendation to prioritize this use of land in our industrial park. Thank you.
Wanda.
I call this the Mary Bill, because I know this is something that she's passionate about, but I too agree. I love the forward thinking and how can we find a place for them, but the right place. So I'm in support of it as well.
Okay, I certainly do too. So I'm ecstatic. I think there's a place for it. There's a need for it, but I think there's an appropriate place for it, which I just think of that property that we're leasing for the substation and what are they ever gonna do with that property now with that ugly thing next to them? So.
So one last comment is that I'm hoping this will bridge the gap to talk about generally the district table that talks about the different land uses that are allowed where in the community, but ultimately lead us to marching down the master plan, comprehensive plan route. It's long overdue for an update. These are the kinds of issues that that once we'll go through that process, and then I think the community conversation would be, how do we, out of those discussions, which of course haven't happened yet, how do we align the zoning ordinance to match the conversations that happened during that process? So step one of a lot more steps, but this was a higher, kind of higher priority issue, that there are people knocking on the door right now that want to do these developments.
So can we do this independent? Can we move this forward independent of the other things that we want to do and eventually wrap this into the new product?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's, I mean, personally, my most experience with getting policy change done is bit by bit like this, because it's just easier to focus on one issue at a time. Ultimately, we can bring back to you kind of, and I'm forecasting maybe 6 months in the future, the whatever conversations do come around, the future land use discussion, zoning, land, overall township land use discussion. We can bring that back and do kind of an omnibus land use bill at some point, but we can move forward with this, get this scheduled with the planning commission as their next available meeting with some other business on it.
And currently, is there anything that would prohibit someone from doing a storage facility in the industrial area?
Just that they have to meet the standards. We have a use specific set of standards. They gotta have 2 acres.
Right.
They
but
gotta
that- other
provide
than that,
kind
but
of other
there's just-
checklist stuff. Yeah, there's nothing that would stop
That
other than
it
getting
being
the land.
commercial now doesn't prohibit it from
No.
being industrial.
Correct. It is also allowed in industrial.
Okay.
You need a motion?
I think we just need a head nod to move forward because it's on the.
Because it's
You
on
do
the
need a
committee.
motion, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
if what this motion would do, to be
Is
clear,
refer
Okay.
to
would formally initiate the
Okay.
zoning amendment, send it to the planning commission.
Would you like to do that, Fonda?
Sure. I move that the Delta Township Board initiate a zoning amendment to amend table 4.18B.1, section 4.18, district use table of the Delta Township zoning ordinance to remove self-storage facilities as a use permit in the C commercial zoning district and refer the amendment to the planning commission to hold a public hearing and provide a recommendation.
Support.
It's been moved and supported to start this process. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Any other
Public comment?
public comments?
Good evening, board members. James Lennon. I'm a triple MBA board member and the trail coordinator at Anderson Park. I just wanted to get up here and just give a quick thank you for the expedited action that you put forward in regards to Anderson Park. I've worked in the state senate for 27 years. And I know one of the biggest complaints about government, whether it be local or state, is how slow it moves sometimes. And so I just want to give a big thank you on behalf of the bikers, on behalf of myself. Just in allowing us to get back out there and do what we love. Just to respond to a few things, because I was quoted a lot here just a little bit ago. Meandering trails. Anderson Park absolutely does have meandering trails. We will acknowledge that. And they exist for a few reasons. They're walking paths that are created by neighbors. They're walking paths that are created by trail users that are, we wouldn't call them random, but paths that are created over time. People use the same paths. Deer use the same paths over time. Over time, those things are created. It is there. The emergency access paths, they're absolutely there. The AAA MBA have cut cut through paths to different portions of trail to allow our equipment to get through. Because we do take care of those trails. I've spent over 30 hours of my personal time in the last 2 weeks there, volunteer. I haven't rode my bike there once since the time change. So we do absolutely take care of those trails. We have cut through to access certain portions of trails that are hard to get to bypass swamps, to get around. So as we move forward in the conversation, we can talk about how we maintain those cut throughs. Whether we let them go back to the woods, that's fine. It's less work for us. But they're absolutely there. Red, green, blue, that's our current trail system. There are 3 colors, and that is what exists right now to this day. It hasn't changed. Homeless encampments. My statement on October 13th, and I will absolutely go back to the YouTube video to confirm this, but I said we cleared the remnants of homeless encampments at Anderson Park. If I said anything otherwise, that is a misrepresentation of what we did as a triple MBA. We do not have that authority. I said we cleared the remnants of homeless encampments. Environmental effect. I'm a mountain biker because I'm an outdoors person. I'm a hiker. I'm an adventurer. I love to be in the woods. I would love to be a part or just sit and listen to that environmental effect study, because if there is something we can do differently, I want to know. I love those woods. I love the forest. I love everything that's in it. So I want it to continue to grow and be a healthy forest, healthy area in Delta Township. So I think that's it. But first and foremost, really just thank you for your time and your effort on this issue. It's greatly appreciated.
We have 5 minutes.
Ian Grofert, I'm a Donegal resident. And for last month, it's ANNE, and I'll spell my last name for you, Grofvert. And I want to thank the board for considering and listening to us and hearing our concerns and being willing to work with us in approving this temporary use permit. And we appreciate the forward-looking vision of that. I do want to look at that property historically. It was used for dumping. The trails that are out there right now, which were referred to as willy-nilly, were planned, laid out, GPS tracked, and approved by the planning commission, whether that was the park or this board. I don't know. I wasn't involved in those meetings in 2008, but I do know that it was prepared and approved by you. Things this evening were really outlined in what I would take to be a very adversarial relationship by one of the board members. We have a very cooperative partnership with all of our trails and land managers. There's 2 observations I have this evening. What you're experiencing at Anderson Park is not unique. Often property owners who are adjacent to a property, when it's getting developed or transformed to recreation, they're concerned about changes. You know, when a new user group comes in, they're scary. There's this new thing in the picture. And again, as I mentioned last time, in the 90s, I was involved with the group that proposed adding mountain bike trails in Ingham County Park. That same board heard fears about criminals, thieves, muggers, rapists. Instead, it's brought generations of hikers, joggers, cyclists, pet walkers, and bird watchers. Unfortunately, at the case that we have at Anderson Park, a single homeowner has for years considered this to be their own personal park. From the very beginning, there were words with the individual who was involved in bringing this park to reality. They've continued to put debris on the trails, and it appears that they've also, rather than being here in this room for these meetings, have made communications with board members and calls to have their own interest, their cause brought to this, and things thrown up as endless obstacles about why an organization and a trail that's been out there since 2008 shouldn't be there. A lot of the issues that have been raised go far beyond after dusk riding. Most public officials understand the value of recreational trails and keeping their communities healthy, bringing visitors to the region, and increasing property values. Numerous studies have found that properties adjacent to trails and recreational facilities increase in value on general 3% to 15% that are depending on the proximity from a trail. So recreating out your back door is important. You'll see trails from properties onto the parkland. Secondly, I hope that the Delta Township leadership appreciates that the MBA is an invaluable partner. At your last meeting, as mentioned, one of the members sort of disingenuously described Anderson Park as being built willy-nilly. It's just a profound mischaracterization of what's out there. The mountain bike trails were planned, approved, and built. They've stayed on those lines. We've attended workshops. We've been trained in proper trail building methods from both local and national organizations to provide a safe journey, careful attention to topography, drainage, just soil types, working at land and soils and maintaining them. So there's this sudden interest in, oh, we're on this property and maybe we shouldn't be there. So it goes beyond that. I just would like you to realize you've got a unique resource and hopefully we can work together to maintain and improve our relationship. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other comments? I promised this time I would use the timer. I thought we were.
You don't need a timer for me. My name is Steve Wickham. I'm from Lanesburg. I'm an avid trail user all over the state and all over the country. Honestly, I ride 5-6 days a week in the woods, not on roads, not where there's cars. Anderson Park is a treasure. I too want to say thank you for your consideration. I know this was an accelerated timeline, but I also know that this shouldn't have come before you. And it's unfortunate that it did. And we feel just as bad about that as some of you do. We promise, not just as an organization, and I'm a member of the MBA and I've served on their board in the past, but I'm a trail user. And so are a lot of people that walk and hike and walk their dogs and everything else. We will continue, as we have done since 2008, to work with your Parks Committee. We've worked very closely with them to get to where we're at today. Again, you have a gem. And the partnership that we have used as a model, a template, as we have fostered relationships with other land users in the area, in the mid-Michigan area. We've added new trails. And we've said, go look at the MOU, go look at how we work with Delta Township. It's been perfect until I don't know what happened. Well, I do, but it's like this came out of nowhere and it was a shock. A shock. We want to do everything we can going forward, not just tonight with this vote, but well beyond April 30th to make this work. And I would suggest that the things that you hand down to the Park Committee is forward-looking in a way that helps establish this park as a destination, because it can be. And I can list you a lot of destinations in the state that people go to just to go ride their mountain bike, and then they spend their money in places nearby. So again, thank you very much. Did I make it under 3?
You're good. Thank you. I think that's it. Board members, any comments?
You had some fun.
You Dennis first?
No.
I just wanted to recognize Clifton Warden Jr., who passed away a couple days ago, a tremendous treasure for our region, trailblazer. And so I just want to recognize him for what he did and give my condolences to the family.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And this is to the fellow board members. You know, we've been going through some stressful time here And it's not just because of political uncertainty that we're dealing with, but also program uncertainties such as the future of Delta Patrol. That's still an unknown. And of course, the differences that we may have to policy in the course of our normal business. I know we'd like to think that we can engage in discourse free from these stresses, that we are robots and can make arguments based solely on critical thinking, and that emotions don't enter into our discourse, but that's nearly impossible to do. We are not robots, we're human and are emotional creatures at heart. So when our passions tend to overtake our better behaviors, I believe that we should politely remind any one of us who may stray off that better course, combined with a dose of forgiveness as well. So in time, I know the board will get past these challenges and will do so even better if we recognize our shared desire for the best possible outcomes and help each other along. So I'd like to leave that note as we leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth?
Can we add to the memo that Marcus put together for with the questions that we have about the Anderson Park moving forward? Can we put something there and ask the Parks Commission to please advise us about how to better advertise Anderson as a destination and use that as part of our placemaking in the future? So I don't know if Marcus is still here. I just want to add that to the other questions that we're sending to the Parks Commission.
Thank you.
With that,
We are adjourned.